Hey there, and welcome to the Weed Out, where we weed out the ghouls and talk about all the things going on in our backyard that are probably somehow related to your backyard. It's a big country, but we have the same problems everywhere. We're trying to survive a capitalist hellscape together. You've noticed at the Weed Out, we've done some rant episodes. We've done some episodes regarding local town meetings and specifically Shot Spotter and Holyoke, but we have discussed larger, broader concepts. So that way, y'all listeners have an idea of we're setting terms. We're trying to have a glossary to work from. So when you hear us cut to our shorthand about dog whistles or the prison industrial complex, we wanted you guys to have an idea of where we're coming from. Now, we plan on doing interviews with local workers because we're a working class focused podcast. And also anybody that's an activist in the movement to defund, abolish the police, or abolish these repressive systems, depends on how big you want to get, but we try to focus local. So admittedly, Joanna and I do not have huge interviewing experience other than being a manager and interviewing people for positions at places of employment. We're very novice when it comes to interviewing on podcast or any of that kind of form. So we figured to break it in, we may as well interview each other. Audience can get to know us and understand where we're coming from and how we could have different backgrounds but come to similar conclusions or have similar values. But we also wanted to get our interviewing chops in. So I without rambling too much further, I would love you to take over, Joanna, and say hello to the crowd and maybe highlight some points that I may have missed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I don't think you missed anything. I just think this is probably more like our first episode, like 2.0 of Get to Know Us, where we may go a little more in depth, but also a different format because we are going to kind of practice our interviewing skills, like you said. So I don't remember who was going to go first. So
I was thinking maybe you take it over.
I'll interview you first.
You have I as much as I can talk loud and be a person in the microphone, you tend to be a little more patient, and I can take some cues from you. So just I have more faith in your interviewing skills than mine. I don't think down the line I will be the prime interviewer. I think I have a tendency to get too excited. I'm working on it. It's important to listen, guys. It's important to listen, but sometimes I get excited and it's hard. So that's like my first fun fact about me. I'm rather excitable. It's a nice way of putting it, I guess.
Oh my God, you are. That's
I guess maybe if you could go, you could kick it off. We'll do an interview with me, then we'll flip the tables, and then we'll talk about what's coming up on the Weed Out the next couple weeks.
All right. So for our listeners, this is more of a get to know you in depth episode. And if you have questions after you listen, please reach out. But just Spencer gave you some background already, but some of you may not have heard our other episodes and Spence talk about where he was born, but where were you born and raised?
I was born in Quincy, Massachusetts, which is, I was technically born in Boston, but I spent the first 18 years of my life in Quincy, Mass, which is eastern Massachusetts. It's the first city south of Boston. I went to high school in Dorchester. I went to a prep Catholic school, which is important because congruence of events of me being in Catholic school, specifically this prep school, Boston College High School, a highly renowned, revered school. My parents really they sacrifice a lot to try to give me an upper head to learn how to code and how to be a white supremacist, teach me how to act like a proper white man. And so I'm thankful in a way. It sucked at the time, but in a way I'm glad because now I understand the game, because I was taught the game at a very young age. And interestingly enough, so I was a Catholic school kid, right? I went to a small parochial school in Quincy Point, knew the same kids for the first 12 years. Tight community. Then I go to an all boys prep high school, super competitive, alpha, encouragement male, just the worst kind of man they were trying to mold, in my opinion, looking back. But my first week there, 9/11 So in a new school, totally out of my depth, 9/11 happens. That's crazy. And then so you're starting to like look around like, oh, the world isn't so fucking rosy. Oh shit, it's they're 13, 14 years old. That's when you normally start questioning what's going on around. You're thinking critically anyways, right? So then this major event happens. Then within the coming weeks, in the aftermath of that, the Boston Globe released an article, the Spotlight series regarding the pedophilia running rampant in the Catholic Church. And, they talk about the last 30 years of cover ups, but really it's the last 1,000 years. The Catholic Church is super corrupt. They have a lot of problems. I was a good Catholic boy. I was a lectern. I was an altar boy. I was a Eucharistic minister. I volunteered for youth groups, all that stuff, right? But when you're 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, and you realize these people have been systematically abusing kids and being protected. And now, granted, I had a relatively stable home situation, so I wasn't a target for these people, thank God. But I knew people that probably would have been a prime target, and if not, they were. There was a lot of kids affected, and it ruined lives, and it's still ruining lives. They're still doing this shit. So that's kind of where I come with my anti-authoritarian take. I realize all these systems that were meant to keep us safe and these great bastions of ba ba ba. Being a man for others is the BC High slogan. It's in Latin, but it stands for be a man for others. And meanwhile, we're covering up these catastrophic crimes that are ruining people's lives for the rest of their lives and creates more issues. So to be frank, that's kind of like, it's important where I come from. I call myself a recovering Catholic. So I'll never get rid of that shame and guilt, but it's also something that keeps me honest in a way. And then there's a lot of self-reflection that comes along with it. So in some ways it's good, but it's like, turn shit into chicken salad. It's just trying to make the best with what you got. And I'm fortunate, I had a roof over my head. My parents tried their best. They have their mental health issues and we have our issues. My dad's basically a Nazi now. He's went down the alt-right Facebook pipeline. So, you can see where the equal reaction comes from. I don't consider myself a leftist per se. I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe we can even talk about the next system until we get the boot off the neck. Like we can't even have a rational conversation when a good majority of our population is being smothered by the repressive systems. And having been a part of a repressive system myself and being fortunate with my status in society to be able to get out, can't no man, but no, you don't leave anybody behind. And so I don't consider myself a leftist. I know it started off a question about where I'm from, but like I'm a working person. So I guess, but I want to take this my soapbox opportunity to tell everybody the left right concept is a European concept. So it's Eurocentric, it's white supremacy at its core. So even identifying as a leftist is problematic as fuck. I think you got to harm reduce, you got to stop the violence by any means necessary. We'll never have a fair system if half or more than half, but the people being marginalized and abused by repressive systems, whether it be churches all the way up to governmental institutions and societal institutions, you're not going to be dealing with a full deck because you've been having a foot on your neck, so to speak, and you don't have all the oxygen going there. It's not fair, and you're not going to think straight. So it's kind of hard for me to identify that way, but for purposes to keep it simple for the average American, well, let's face it, our culture is white supremacy. So I guess you have to identify as a leftist. And being from Quincy's an interesting thing. It's a working class city. It had a big industry in the 70s and 80s, all the way up to the 70s and 80s building warships. And that industry went away. It got really depressed, drugs, all that stuff. So my parents were able to buy a house cheap, move in, and like buku bucks out of that in the 90s and early 2000s when the markets exploded, right? So timing was great for my parents. But I have a problem with participating in that system because it made them miserable. So when I think of Quincy, when you ask me where am I from, I think of all these things. I think of the drug addicts, the working class people, the homeless people I remember seeing every day. And then the way, even talking to my family, like they whitewash how it was, even just that experience. So my
Mhm.
my home is a really, I'm proud of being from Quincy, but it's also like Quincy's got a shit ton of problems, and always it's buried so deep. And it's just like we're finding in Holyoke. I'm a transplant to Holyoke, but it feels so similar. I mean, it's only 100 miles away, so
Mhm.
it's dominated by Irish Catholics, kind of like my upbringing was dominated. So it feels odd. It feels like fighting the same monster. So yeah, that's where I'm from, and I ended up going to UMass and coming on out here. So, and traveled in between now, but I've settled here because it's where I have connections, I guess, my network.
Nice. We're glad you're here. Um, and
Y'all couldn't get
what?
rid of me if you tried.
Huh?
Y'all couldn't get rid of me if you tried.
Yeah, I know. I don't think, well, there may be some people who are trying to, but the majority of people listening and myself, we're glad you're here. So,
Even the ghouls that don't particularly love our shenanigans, we're white people to them. They just see us as nuisances, as mosquitoes. Like they don't. That's the frustrating and like the trap, where it's like, well, they're treating me all right, even though I'm being kind of a dick to them. you know,
yeah.
giving
And
you
some of them,
giving
I
you
believe.
way more grace than they give, and that is a privilege. Like you have to remember, like what we witnessed in October 4th meeting with Kevin Jordan and Izzy at the end. I mean, that wouldn't have gotten that bad if it were me and I had the same record. Unless you just literally swap me in for Izzy, like it would never have gotten that out of hand. And that's because Kevin Jordan would have checked himself before, because I mean, isn't that the game? It's like
Well, I'm a woman, so I
punch,
don't know exactly.
you always punch down, and punching another mid 30, 40-year-old white dude, figuratively speaking, it's less likely. It's like nobody gives a shit about wearing a mask. I've seen other people get shit, but nobody. I'm 5'10", average looking white dude with a beard, and kind of looks like I look like a sweat for a living. I got dirty overalls on, and people just don't fucking say shit to you. But I see other people say shit all the time. Like I talk about. Anyways, um,
Well, so I have another question if that answers, if that's your final answer, I guess.
yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off. So I wonder, like, how do you survive this capitalist hellscape that we're in? Even like now and thus far. And if you don't want to share where you work, that's okay. But this is a question we came up with together for each other. So I'm guessing you'll tell me.
Yeah, I mean, how do I survive this capital hellscape? I am fortunate in a lot of ways. I have a partner that um, has a master's degree, and she's a social worker. I am a food service worker, so my career can be best put under that umbrella. I've done everything under the sun, from line cook, prep cook, catering cook, butcher, retail butcher, butcher for restaurants. Uh, uh, I've driven a truck and done wholesale fish sales with larger company. I've worked as an ad hoc butcher by myself. That I'll shout out that I make meat products for daily operation in East Hampton. So we've known each other a long time. I kind of have uh, a very loose, flexible schedule there. So I'm an independent contractor because I process and produce things, and then they freeze them or smoke them or preserve them somehow. We plan this stuff out. We try to work. We do work with local farms too. So that's kind of that's where my where I used to put a lot of my energy before the weed out was trying to network and build up networks to get local meat. I'm a butcher by passion. That's like the only job I've really loved. I never loved being a cook, and didn't have much interest in being a chef. I could serve, but that was only to like fill in, and it's just none of that stuff excited me. And to be frank, I could smoke weed. That's exactly cook, because I've been self-medicating. It turns out, since I was a young person. My parents are kind of my home life was, though safe in a lot of ways. It was problematic in other ways. So I've been smoking weed a long time. So that's kind of ended up in this career. Um, but it turns out, I excel at certain elements, processing and, fabricating meat products, whatever it is. Like I just makes sense to me. I've
Mhm.
always been good at all the aspects of it, portioning to being efficient and quick and getting high yields. It's just something that makes sense to me, like taking shit apart
Mhm.
and making something new with it. So like when I was a kid, my dad did a lot of restoration projects around. That's kind of what he specializes in, carpentry. Um, and so I would take apart moldings. Like you have to be very meticulous with different crowbars. And so when somebody showed me how to butcher, I was like, huh, I've been doing this since I was a kid, like taking stuff apart and trying to salvage the wood and taking the nails out. And like, it was like a game slash mandatory work at my parents, living with my parents. So it made me really good at that. And putting it together a menu overwhelms me. So, but making something awesome, like a specific kind of sausage or charcuterie for some other creative person, like another chef or whoever, event planner, whatever they do, to do their thing. I love that part of it. So that's kind of how I survived this capitalist hellscape. I'm thankful. I've done corporate jobs. I worked for a bank for a couple years, Citizens Bank. They're all bad, all of them. They all collude. That's like the known secret. Like after working at a bank for 2 years, like I we talk about it. It's banking is really predatory, even the quote unquote safe ones. So I'm a little jaded with that, but I don't have a ton of experience, so I tend not to give people financial advice. You want to know how to smoke something, marijuana, tobacco, and or meat. I will be your man. But yeah, so that's what I do. I just kind of, without being too vague, I mean, I'm very happy with my employment status. All the people that I collect money, I trade my labor for. Um, it's professional, it's fair, and there's great respect. But I've gone through the ringer prior, so um, I'm a little we're a little flashy. I'm sure somebody could figure out where I work, but I guess I mean
No, I mean that's fine what you said.
daily
That's
operation
good.
because I know they're down with our content.
Yeah, and their food's awesome, and people in Western Mass, I'm
I just
sure,
don't.
listening go there. So
It's not that I'm a coward. If I was asked questions at my job about this, I would not hesitate. I don't give a fuck.
yeah,
But at
no,
the
no
same time,
worries.
I'm not trying to bring smoke either. So it's one of the few times I'm showing discretion, I guess. Like I'm not really advertising to my coworkers that this is what we do on our media company, but um, yeah, I also am not shy at all. I've made it very clear that I think we need to democratize the workplace. And this has always been a problem for me. I didn't have the words for it, but every stop along my professional career, it's when it's hit bumpy roads, it's because I was calling out some bullshit and trying to rally the crew. And most of the time it would get sorted out. But that comes with a lot of gripe. So I've never even union organized. I can only imagine. I've seen what the bosses get act like when you actually put something in writing with two other people, freak the fuck out. And it's
Yep.
like, dude, imagine if you had to negotiate with all of us like this.
Yeah,
Just the ones that feel confident enough to write it down and be like, hey, this is what we need. And it's a delicate balance because would I love to radicalize my coworkers? Absolutely. But, you know, it's hard to know. So you got to like pick your battles. So we're here to hopefully get that information out there. Um, yeah, I mean, and also if you don't have a union, always ask for more. Never. I guess that's my life advice, and that was given to me. That's not. I've had many bosses that liked me over the years. That after you leave or they know you're on your way out because you're moving or whatever, they go, "Hey man, never settle." You know, I know
for
you.
sure.
Oh, I've said no to you because my boss said no, but like I always appreciated that you would advocate for yourself. So
Yeah, it can never hurt to ask. That's
in the
very
food
good
service,
advice.
the dirty secret is people don't advocate for themselves in the food service because a lot of people are working under the table. They don't have that leverage, or they're just getting by. And this is my life. These are the people I work with. So that's why this matters, and that's why I brought my partner in my home situation. It's like I'm fortunate.
Mhm.
I do have the leverage to tell my bosses, hey man, this is what it's going to take, whether scheduling and or um, money. It's like I can do that because I have a little breathing room. So that's me sharing.
All awesome. I want to just plug that I know you don't love cooking, but I think you're also a good cook. So when you do cook, it's fun.
Oh, like I've executed other people's shit. Like I know how to swing a hammer and put the nails where they're supposed to go.
You really do. I'm just gonna
I,
say.
I'm not the I'm not the designer. You know, what I mean? Like that's just not how my brain works with the food stuff. And it took a long time for me to like, because like all your friends like want to be chefs. Like, and this is
No,
all
for sure. For sure. I
I'm
know what
like,
you're saying, but I just want to give you props as your friend who breaks bread with you sometimes.
right. Well,
It's fun for that reason because you
I,
did do it.
my favorite thing to do at any job, was when they would hand me the clipboard to organize, to like, and by hand you the clipboard, whether it's ordering or scheduling or no, maybe not scheduling sucked, but you know planning the day out, like doing the whiteboard, the to-do list. It's just because like I always had a sixth sense for like what we're gonna need. I pick up on patterns, you know what I mean? So you work
Mm-hmm.
for a couple months, you see the patterns on like what product you go through when, and you just notice things. And then once you're able to like, also don't do work you're not getting paid to do. So you can pick up
Mm-hmm.
a pattern, but don't write it down until they're paying you to write it down.
For sure.
So, but like, the cheat, because I can do a lot of it in my head and witness, like, keep track of all that stuff, flow and patterns, I guess is this really the only way to put it. And this is talking about ordering, organizing, requesting the right people on the right days, like having enough bodies on a Wednesday, because you just like the client, the walking customers, or this is working the butcher shop. It's like you can get by with three guys, right? Three people.
Mm-hmm.
But you just know there's going to be some random people because it's like a Wednesday in Northampton, and you just like it's just like these random people, like random food service people, I want to come in and have the bells and whistles wrong for me. It's like you're in the middle of production, So it's like I always felt like I could always do that, kind of anticipate needs, but that's trauma, right? And
Yeah, but it is a good thing in that industry, I think, for sure.
it's reward. It's like kind of like you don't
It
get
is
paid a lot, but
rewarding though, yeah.
it's rewarding. Yes, for like when you kind of you're in a good groove of guessing right, and it's not even guessing. It's just you're picking up the pattern, and
Totally.
then because you're picking up the pattern, you're not losing anything on the service end. So then the customers are happy, so it all ends up working great. And once you start getting hiccups, like you don't get the chickens out at 4 o'clock like you say you do, and you're always lagging, people are going to stop believing you. They're going
Right.
to stop fucking coming in, and that's not like a thing. I've like, that's not like a specifically triggering moment working at the butcher shop, but that's just the reality. It's like you just realize after a while, it's like eventually if you don't have the thing, they don't even ask anymore.
But no, for sure. I think that's with a lot of stuff, but for
It's
sure with
really
food.
reasonable, but how many businesses do we know in Western Mass that are just like they're just winging it, baby? Like
Oh, I
if it,
mean, no, I'm not
it
even talking no smack about any restaurant or food service place in Western Mass, but after the pandemic, it is
was like this before.
but even more so now. Come on. It's full throttle, just wild out there.
We have an interesting dichotomy here in Western
We
Mass.
do. We do. I mean, the food's great too. I'm not gonna lie. Like you can find some really good farm to table places throughout the Connecticut River Valley where we live and in the Berkshires in Western Mass. And like then you can also find some other not really good food, but I encourage people to like, we shouted out Daily Up, but thanks for sharing those, Spence, because you're totally right. It is a wild kind of a wild industry and it's really interesting actually.
Yeah, and when people talk about political correctness, like all the anything you could think of, dude, the restaurant or the service industry it's like that on steroids. You think Twitter's bad, right? Like that's every fucking day. And like you
Right.
have to, and sadly, you have to pick your battles. So like in my current job, I go into a lot of larger like vendor facilities, right? And these places have it's all men. There's very few women in this industry, right? And not to say women make things better,
We
but
do.
so there's a missing component of society there. So the shit you hear, and it's like you have to kind of pick your battles because sometimes it's like a dude that's been there for 20 years. He's untouchable. He might even be one of the owners. You never know. Like you never know. They all look the same. We're all wearing work clothes covered in fish guts.
Yeah.
And you just hear some out of pocket stuff from people, and it's hard because it's like you're not there representing the company. And so I have my ways of being like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not the kind of person you should say that to. Like, I think you thought I was somebody else. That's
Totally.
a nice way out of it. But it's crazy how rampant are the issues we talk about, even in this industry. It's a working class industry with honest, decent ish, but we're all plagued by this issue. And then it's multilingual down there too. So like everybody's kind of, the communication is a lot of body language, a lot of eye contact, which is cool actually. Like, how this is a sidebar, but like this is what I love about my job. It's because you have people speaking Portuguese, you have people speaking Spanish, different kinds of Spanish. Then you have like the Boston dudes talking their Boston shit, and then you have normal sounding American people, and we're all kind of doing this dance, and we all got to work together, and we all work for different companies, right? But we're all kind of like flowing in this big, industrial zone, and yeah, the amount of communicating that happens, and the Europeans think, Parisians thinks that's weird that we make eye contact and do body language. It's like, no, because literally nobody, it's a good chance you're going to interact with somebody that doesn't speak even the type of English you speak.
Mm.
Like, let's even say like, oh, English is the American shit. No, I mean, like classically Spanish, I mean, I think I hear more Spanish. That's just because of my job, but like I hear more Spanish speaking and different kinds of Spanish in my job than I do English. So yeah, there's a lot of this kind of stuff, and misogyny is pretty rampant. So it's like you can only communicate so much. So when you're like the best you can do in a lot of situations is kind of like not laugh and just like deadpan stare at them when somebody says something out of pocket. You're just kind of, I don't get it, like
Yeah.
it's very unlike me.
I do get it.
If I'm at a public setting and I hear some bro talking some shit, like I tend to get a little mouthy, but it's different at work. And that's one thing that's what sucks about the non-democratized workforce. It's like, we kind of can't upset the masters upstairs, the oligarchs, so we all got to kind of just fucking deal with each other. And there can't be any like accountability in a way that would make things better too. And just like some people got crappy attitudes. Everybody, because I kind of pick up on stuff. So I kind of realize like certain facilities I go to, like their floor manager fucking hates when drivers back in, but their order's not ready, like or whatever, just like random shit like that. And they'll be completely open docs, but he'll still get upset, like you just pick up on these things and you just like, yeah, here, you don't do that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just like not trying to get on this dude's bad side, just so
Mhm.
there's a lot of yeah, I think a lot of us are from traumatized childhoods where we always had to anticipate one of our parents' needs. That's my rant about the food industry.
That's fair.
But
It is a
we're
lot,
but it's
a lot of that.
it's hard work, and so
It
next
is
time
hard work.
you think your fish sandwich or your hamburger or your whatever is too expensive, just remember there's lots of faceless elements to this. It's not just the line cook. He's not out there raising and slaughtering the cow and then processing it. No, he's just the line cook. And then there's the owner, and then there's this, and there's the drivers, and there's this. And so it's like, just remember that, shit costs what it costs.
Yeah, and the server didn't do it at all. So
Right.
chill out on her, y'all. Chill
Yeah.
out.
So, tip your servers. even if it's terrible service, you just
Try
unfortunately
just
the reality is that's worked into the wage, like as worker solidarity, even when you're like that's the scam. And
Oh, it's a total scam. The restaurant lobby is huge, but thank you for sharing that with the audience so that
I
they know
vote for the
because
cook
it's
if I had a guaranteed
horrible.
wage. But what ends up happening that then you bifurcate the front of house and the back of house because you see on a Friday night, you getting your fucking shit pushed in. You've been spending 3 days getting ready for the Friday, Saturday. Like, on top of being open service, you're doing your lead up prep and, and you make the same every week, no matter what. And the work's going to get done in the same amount of time because God forbid you stay over. Um, and then you see a server walk out with $500 in their pocket for working a 6-hour shift. It's like, well, I realized, oh, well, that makes up for Monday that they have to give up their day, come in and work their one fucking lunch shift that they're required to work because everybody for some reason needs to have a lunch shift.
Mm-hmm.
A college kid that works 2 nights on the weekend has to have a lunch shift because that's the rules. And so they have to have a day where they come in and just occupy the space, make no fucking money. It's
Yeah,
trash.
it is. It's like a trash setup. You're right.
And
It's
it all goes
it's.
back to the reconstruction. I mean, these were the jobs that.
I know.
So just remember that, please. I mean, we could write a book on wage tip labor.
Yeah, we really. I mean, it's. Thank you for sharing that. It's something people should really think about. When you go out, you're supposed to tip, and there's a reason because otherwise, people aren't making any money.
The
Basically.
only person that makes out is the restaurant,
Yeah, the owners. You're just.
and they
It's
still fuck
really.
it up. How many restaurant owners I've worked for that are fucking incompetent?
They're so some
All because they just
same
wanted to be a
preach.
boss and wanted to have no interest in actually doing the work, which is kind of fine if you're planning on growing your establishment. But if like you're taking profit from the company and literally it's 10 employees and you're not doing shit, that's 1/10 of the work. And
It
you're
should.
getting all the money. Like, think about it. And that creates this really toxic back and forth and or subservient, like Stockholm syndrome shit. Like I've been in those loops where it's like they like me though. It's like they like that you work overtime and don't complain.
Yeah.
Or they like that I create things and they make money off of it and then they own it. Like all my sausage. So I'm a butcher, guys. So sausages are my thing, right? So technically, I don't own my fucking recipes that I've made for other people at previous places. My current situation at Daily Op, I mean, they're my recipes. We collaborate, and they pay me, and I make the product, and they give me credit. I don't really need the credit. Like the money is good. Like I don't need them. I mean, I would love them to tell the restaurant owners, maybe spread the
Right.
way, but I don't need the regular customer to know, like Spencer made the sausage. Who gives a fuck? Is it good? Because they did all the other cool shit. They made the bread. They made the whatever to go along with it, whatever the sausage calls for. So, um,
But it's usually good. When I've had it. So again, yummy.
yeah, and
Thanks
it's
for the
all. And the
cookie.
reality is, no man's an island. That's one thing I learned about in the food service world. It's like now that I've been on the wholesale like delivery, and I go into the back door of restaurants and supermarkets and butcher shops. Now I have that perspective too. Where if I'm ever back in the butcher shop or a restaurant and I'm waiting on a delivery and I'm getting all huffy, am I gonna be a dick to that driver? No, unless they
Yeah.
like are like incompetent and like throwing my shit down the stairs or something. Like,
Right.
yeah, we're gonna have a problem. But like even then, it's like I'm just gonna take a picture and send it to your boss. Like I'm not even gonna fucking clown.
I love that.
That like now like I've
I
only
get you.
I
I
can
get you.
count on my hands how many times I've had a driver like that. Like it doesn't happen. The drivers and when I've worked in New York City, Boston, Quincy, Western Mass, and now I deliver and I'm the wholesaler. So like I know what it's like to be on the other side, driving the truck, getting stuck in traffic. It gets my goat when like my boss like sometimes you get stuck on the Mass Pike. Shit happens,
Oh my
right?
God. So often you get stuck on the mass bike.
Every
So
now and then, like most, like literally, it's always
I'm not even saying just you. There's just times on the pike where you do.
and this happens like, and usually it's because somebody got hurt.
Oh yeah. And there's a few
And you're stuck in a 30
exits.
mile, there's a 30-mile break between, before you get to the Berkshires. So there's no exit, there's nowhere for you to go. So somebody gets stuck. I mean, the worst, I got stuck there for 5 hours. That was awful. But
That is
you know,
awful.
like an hour, 45 minutes, and then you're getting calls from chefs, or you call the chefs, I should say, and you, or the people expecting the food, and you let them know, and 99 point, I can't, like, it's like to a 10th decimal point, everybody's chill. Everybody
Oh
gets,
yeah, especially in that scenario, like you can't do
like, well, there's
anything.
nothing you can do.
Exactly. Nothing.
Yeah, like if this was every week, it's like, all right, guys, clearly you can't get here when you say you can get here, so we need to readdress this. Like, that's a different story. But when there's legitimate, like, we normally show up at 3 and we're not going to get there till 4 to this particular spot. The one time it happens where the guy goes ballistic on you, you're like, or your boss or whoever, you're kind of like, there must be something going on. This person must be like really, maybe other deliveries are delayed too, and they're just freaking the fuck out. But it's also just like, fuck you, man.
Yeah, like I would be I would be like, I just hope you're okay. Like that long of a time to be trapped on the highway.
It's okay to get mad at the salesman when the salesman fucks up,
Well,
but
that's why I said the server comment earlier. Like don't shoot the messengers. We're the low totem pole people.
literally, and you get paid on the hour. So if I don't show up because my back hurts, which I've lost coworkers, in my short career doing this already, where it's like their back hurts and they can't work anymore, and it's awful to see. Like, I'm only 35, but seeing people fall out of the workforce, in, like, people, real tangible people, it's awful. And now they're gonna, I mean, that's kind of part of why we're doing the weed out. Like, that's kind of it's just another way to diversify, when my back gives out and I can still run my gams, my mouth.
Well, that leads me into the next question. If you think you would want to do that, but basically, you've already answered some of what's radicalized you or activated you in life up to this point, but people don't know that. They may know that you and I have wrote for the Shoestring. It's an independent publication online in Western Mass focus typically.
Their website, shoestring.org.
Thank you for sharing that. And then we started this podcast, and we will have other projects we're working on together too, everyone, that we'll share eventually. So I just want Spencer to kind of talk about what radicalized him to kind of start writing and start this podcast and really just put, your voice out there more. And you've mentioned some things already, but like maybe there's some stuff that really stands out that you want to talk about or talk on.
Well, so I went to college at UMass for communications. So in my head, when this is the mid 2000s, I thought I was going to be like a radio DJ or something. Music's a passion of mine. We didn't bring that up, but it used to be a bigger passion. Now I'm, just a older man. I still love music, but I used it as a good outlet for me for a long time. I briefly played as a professional musician in New York City, unsuccessfully, but I briefly did it, so I have to say I did it.
Then it's not unsuccessfully. It's something that you did.
Yeah, no, in the capitalist sense. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was like, come on, bud, that sounds
part of my
cool.
radicalization, because I wanted to do this, and I realized, I got diagnosed with diabetes at 21. Mostly it's genetic, but it's also, it was definitely sped up by stress, full time.
How'd you find out about it?
Just regular doctor's visit. Well, my doctor noticed because I got my physical when I started college, and like my weight fluctuated like crazy over 3 years, and he was like, "That's weird." So, and I'm like a slender-ish person, so to see my weight fluctuate 30 pounds in either direction is not good, right? To go, so that's a 60-pound swing in 3 years. Down 30, up 30, back in between, down 30 again. So my doctor was like, "That's weird." So, basically I was going to school, and I was basically emancipated from my family. So I was paying all the bills, and I couldn't get access to a lot of loans. So I had to pay a lot out in cash. So I worked full time for 4 years. And, I think that's part of what kickstarted diabetes. I probably would have got it eventually, because it just runs in my family.
Right. But you were like stressing your body out too, and probably living like a college kid too.
My father had heart failure, and then he became diabetic. So like, he wasn't a diabetic, he got sick. So it's like, that's what it would, he had a major malfunction in his mid-50s, and that's what kicked the diabetes on. And then I had like a long period of severe stress that brought it on. So stable. It's all good. I just went to the doctor yesterday. So
Yay.
I've been on top of it. I've been fortunate that I've been able to figure out healthcare, but that's kind of why I stopped.
Definitely. I mean, that is fortunate, but even though it sucks, that's
That's why I
awesome.
stopped doing music, because I had to get a job that could have regular pay and I could be covered under insurance. So
Right.
unfortunately, I had to make, you know, very heartbreaking decisions. I couldn't stick it out in New York City longer than a couple years. Like I strung it out as long as I could. Um, but anyway, so I went to college for that, and then these traumatic things happened, and and not to play a silent violin, but this is part of my radicalization. It's like, wow, there's no safety net. Like, I could grovel to my family, I guess, but like, where's the dignity in that? And especially if most of us don't have great relationships with our family, and that's part of the problem is that in white families and culture is that money is, I put a roof over your head, therefore I'm a good parent, is a big, but they didn't, make it an emotionally safe place to be,
Right.
or whatever. Everybody's scenario is different without getting too into mine, but that's not a reality. Like, I would lose my mind if I had to like if I had to get involved financially with my parents again. They would fall back into their pattern of the way they leveraged their resources
Mm-hmm.
to demand fealty, and it overlooks some not so good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is, like, and that's why I brought up my partner earlier, like, the reality is of having shared resources, it's a lot more stable than being a single person. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really fortunate in that regard. So part of my radicalization is like, well, I have, like, I have relative. I'm not, if things go south for me today, my bank account's emptied. Like, I'm not homeless quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I recognize there are people out there in my same jobs, in the people I deal with every day, that they are, and that's shitty, and that bothers the fuck out of me. And it doesn't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see things like the police, like, of course, George Floyd, right? Um, I was definitely pre George Floyd. I was definitely more of a nihilist about it, and I realized that nihilism is an alt right pipeline. It's like, it's all fucked.
Yeah.
Keep your head down, because I grew up in, that's how you got through the authoritarian parental style and the authoritarian church. Like, you just put your fucking
Right.
head down, and
That makes sense.
you get through. The only way through is through,
Right.
because if you raise too many waves, it gets worse.
Oh,
Like, I
yeah.
saw in my
That makes
sister.
sense.
My middle sister is a lot more of a rabble rouser than I was. I was definitely more of a survivalist. I'm spunky, because all Petersons are
You are
spunky.
you are spunky.
I mean, my mom and dad, some of their best qualities are that they don't back down, but it's also one of their worst qualities, right? Um,
Hey, everything is,
yin and yang, right? Like,
yeah, like there we have to find balance, but I know what you're saying totally.
so what radicalized me was, unless you have a great family situation, or even if you have a quote unquote great in some ways, there's some emotional instability there. I won't even call it abuse per se, but like, I think of some of my buddies I grew up with that their parents are like manipulative and fucked up, but they need them, so they like hang around them, and it's like, that's weird too. Like, and then I see people with healthy parental relationships. I'm like, that's
Yeah, and good for you if you that's
look how
like
it can be.
good for them if you do have some like good relationships, but I know what you're saying. Like a lot of familial relationships, especially parental,
And they can
they
be
have problems.
they have hierarchy in them,
Well,
usually.
for sure, because we were like their children. So
And whether it's your uncle who's wealthy and the other uncle's a pauper, like, whatever, like the hierarchy that exists and the weird stuff. My thing is, I love to discuss, or I love to bring stuff to the
stop
open.
it. You do not.
I love to bring stuff to the
I'm
open. So that
kidding. I'm
doesn't
being
fly in my face.
sarcastic.
That's
I
fly in my they're loud and brash, but you don't unmask the game. It's like, that's like the cardinal sin. and it's very, so, seeing how the patterns are similar, and people being a little more open-minded, I stopped being so cynical and nihilist post George Floyd, because it's like, oh wow, cool. And I learned about other things other than left, right, socialist, commie, authoritarian, totalitarian. I learned that there's other things. The spectrum is a circle, it's a ball, it's a three-dimensional ball. It's not a left, right binary. It's not even a quadrant, like sometimes you see those political maps and it looks like a graph. I'm talking about, Joanna,
Yeah,
in one of the four quadrants. I think
totally.
it has depth too, right? So it's not just there. So because your trauma has to be involved, like putting yourself in a box is crazy, but it's about values at the end of the day. So I guess the radical in me, with the history of going to school for communications, recording music, creating things, I have always kind of been gravitated towards this kind of medium. So
Hmm.
it's a good job to, or a good, and if we're spitting facts and truth, that's great. Like, and
Yeah, I agree, and that's what we try to
saying,
do
but saying the part, being bold and saying the thing that needs to be said, so other people can say it.
for
Yeah.
sure.
It's harder for our friends. This isn't an excuse, but like, think about our normie friends. I don't think it's an excuse, but it's something I can reason with. They got kids, they got this. They're not trying to get into knockdown, drag out, screaming matches at PTO meeting, right?
Right.
See how like they get kind of, well, the fascist side. Let them have their point, like let them have their views, and it's not saying, yeah, force them to have different views, but it's like you're also weirdly, it's like normalizing their views, you know
Yeah, I
yeah,
know what
yeah.
you're saying.
But it's also like, I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about that. um I don't have to
So
worry
I worry about kids even though I don't have them, though. You know what I
about,
mean?
but me popping off is gonna potentially bring harm to my child.
No, for sure. We are not harming children ever. That's
Reality is,
very
these
true.
people will harm you. They'll call DCF on you. They'll call the police on
Well,
you.
yeah, that's how they do. They like
That's
weaponize these things.
are the and let's face it, like when you're born in this country, you get that birth certificate, that you're no longer property of your parents, you're property of the US government.
Oh, yeah, if they become involved and
Like,
want to take
it's
over.
very easy for the government to take kids. Very
Oh,
easy.
for it is. You're not lying. I'm gonna
And
say I completely
people weaponize those systems all the time.
I agree.
So, and we're we focus on police here, but
We do, but any corrupt system, and
abolishment of these systems, these harmful systems, that includes DCF, I would say.
I would
Like,
say too. I agree with you there, hon. We
you
can
know,
talk about that in another episode, but for people out there, I mean, you are taking children from their families for incidences like just being too poor,
right.
being
So
houseless. So that's just one example, even.
to answer, to sum up your answer, like why am I radicalized? I guess it's like, I don't. I also don't. We say radicalized, and it's kind of in
I
quotations. From
know, I don't mean to say that, but it's the
actually
best
think,
way to explain it, I guess.
I absolutely. I mean, because that's what people will describe us as. So
I
it's like,
know, I don't feel radical though, but I know, so I understand what I thank you for saying that too.
call you, and that's fine. I know at the end of the day, I can sleep saying, I just don't want to do harm. And I think that's admirable. That it's also saying, not saying you have all the ideas, because like you need to have humility. Like, I don't have all the answers. So when somebody,
No, that's
oh, we're gonna do without cops, it's like, what are we doing with cops, guys? Like, let's ask that fucking
exactly
question. Like,
exactly. Let's start there.
what
That's
is this
right.
fucking thing? Why are you challenging my thing that doesn't even fucking exist?
That's right.
What the fuck is this thing you're trying to defend? It's like, it's indefensible. Yeah, how do we, yes, because there's so many people that are fucking brainwashed. That is their reality. The cops are there to protect and serve. Like, that's a shared delusion to the point where it's real.
I
And
know it is really like a shared delusion. I want you to just, I'm going to
accept,
focus on that. That's a very good way of putting it to the
and
audience. Like,
what do we do? It's like, you can't blow up police stations. That's not
no, no. And we're not saying to do
against
that
our,
at
that goes
all.
and not to say we're pacifists, but it's like that doesn't work because all that will do is galvanize, and rightfully, reasonably so. Like a bunch of lives were just taken. That's a problem. Like any community is gonna have a fucking problem with that, no matter
Yeah,
what.
we are not advocating for that in
No,
any
not at
way.
all. But like, so what do? You can't also nicely ask. So we have to work on undoing the shared delusion. That's kind of the whole point of having these discussions, having these podcasts,
Definitely.
and also we also know I know that it's exhausting to be around me when I'm talking about this stuff.
No, it's not. I really don't think it is. I know that we do this together, but
It's exhausting, and so I also was like, no, that's fair. So why don't I we put it down in a format that you can come to it when you're ready. When you're ready, you come to it.
for those people who it is exhausting for.
Yeah, and it's reasonable to be exhausted.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Why are you getting salty with me?
Because I just don't want you to say that you're exhausting. I feel like that's
Oh, no. I think the yeah,
the
no,
topic is.
the
I know it's
perception is
hard.
I'm exhausting because of the topic I'm talking about. When it's the topic is exhausting, it's exhausting. But
It
what else?
is.
What else is there to do? I mean, we just
I,
ignore
don't-
it.
I wasn't meaning to get salty, first of
No,
all.
it's fine. I was just teasing. Um, what are we supposed to do? What the
No,
fuck?
I hear you. I hear you. I get like more I get ruffled, so I guess I was getting a little salty. You're right.
But we're just that's I guess that's where I'm at. Where
That's good. So then you started with the shoestring writing,
yeah.
and we still totally we love them. Like Spencer said, the shoestring.org.
Yeah,
Um
so we still we're just
we
contributors. We don't work.
yeah, we love contributing when we have something to contribute.
Yeah, and we're
And
definitely more punditry, I guess, would be what we kind of have done so far. Punditry seems a little crass,
well, we've mostly covered issues with like local police, which makes sense for us. Then.
but yeah, it's important to support local media. So Shoestring, please check them out. They do
Definitely, they're great.
very tight journalism. They don't they
And
don't sensationalize, even though some of these topics are sensational. So
it's true. They don't F around. They don't propaganda. I love it.
they have great ethics.
They do. Wonderful ethics. And
That's
for
not just
me,
because we know them and have
no, they're
it's just
just great.
the reason we say that is because we've been following them for years and they've been consistent. So
Well, and that's why it's such an honor to be a contributor. And
right.
that's why I continually hope to stick with them because they are, like I said, it's just a wonderful publication that I hope continues. And I think they're even having a campaign for the next maybe week or month. So check out, like I said, just go to their
Follow them
website.
online. And if you like their content, you can always go to Patreon and support them there. I think they have a Patreon.
But they're
But
also doing like a special right now because it's like an independent media specific. So, I mean, if that's important to you, like, thank you for pointing that out, Spencer. You can support local independent journalists. They have a wonderful group of contributors. So that's kind of
they actually, the
this is a
Gazette,
free ad. This is a free ad for you, the shoestring.
the Hampshire Gazette laid off a bunch of writers and stuff last year.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for.
But their loss is Shoestring's win because they got
Oh,
Dustin,
completely.
who's again a very even-handed, fair journalist who's been on the missing gun stuff with Holyoke for years. So he's doing good work, and it's a real shame that the Gazette let him go. But hey,
Hey, he's working still, so that part's
less,
awesome.
yeah, and he's probably less encumbered, honestly.
I mean,
Probably
I
a lot.
hope.
I mean, we're not in the room, but I'd imagine working for the Shoestring versus the Gazette is different.
Yeah, or just being independent completely because I'm sure people contributing to the shoestring typically have like multiple almost like freelance
Yeah, it's like a
probably. Yeah, freelance journalism stuff. So
it's a beautiful thing. What it does is it encourages independence, and oversight.
yeah, and it's all Western
Part
Mass.
of a company, they got to protect every element of the company.
Right. And the best part is it's all Western Mass and they are interesting stories that you might not see in other news outlets locally. So really good stuff.
And I guess I just want I wanted to create something that gives working class people a voice they can recognize. Like I listen to, other podcasts, or I listen to some mainstream media here and there, or see the clips at least. If you're on Twitter, this is a random shout out, but if you're on Twitter, follow ACYN at ACYN ASIN. This creator, he's been on Twitter since it started, but he most of the time when you see ridiculous political clips, he's been the one that who captured it and shared it first. That's kind of his niche. But I guess what I'm getting at is, support people doing that work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say then support us. Like we're gonna have our Patreon be more
We're gonna
active
do
in the
this
next.
either way. So if you think we're gonna stop because we don't get money, that's not. But money helps pay the bills, and
Oh yeah, we have to eat. We want to like be able to buy equipment that we work, but we also do this on top of our all already full-time work schedules. So we really hope if you like our content and you want us to be able to create more content that you would check out our Patreon and subscribe to some of our campaigns, or maybe just become a one-time contributor and see what happens. But we'll release stuff about that. So thanks for bringing that up, Spencer, because yeah, I mean, we are going to be asking our audience for help doing that. And we're happy and thankful for their support along the way so far. Like we're so thankful for being able to cover some of the things we've covered. I think you'd agree. And then just the feedback we've received has been great.
it's been far better than I expected. But that's how it is when you start doing something. I'm sure we're here trying to give voice to some people that don't have a voice. I mean, you turn, like I was trying to say earlier, you turn on CNN, you whatever, Boston Globe. It's the stories don't accurately tell the whole picture of what's happening inside our government, inside our society. And it's important to also kind of get out there in a casual way, talk about some out there ideas. Abolition is really common sense, and it's a lot of people have this in them. That's the thing that gives me hope. I think deep down people do feel this way. They just are, well, this is the way it is, and it's hard enough for me to get up, go to work, pay the bills. So we're here for you. Like we see you, and we want to get that message out there. So down the line, to finish up this interview, I guess I'll take over here, where it's just like we want to get good at interviewing so we can hear from people out there and create content like that, and give voice to people that don't get a chance, and we can tell their stories.